Welcome to this session. In this session, we will discuss Samanya, the remaining part of Samanya, that is a generality. Then apart from that, we will discuss other categories or padarthas of the Vaisesika philosophy. As you know that Vaisesika philosophy accepts 7 kind of padarthas or categories. What are those? Dravya or substance, guna or quality, action or karma, samanya or generality, visesa or particularity, then inherence or samabhaya, then the last one is abhava or non-existence. So, therefore, you find that according to Vaisesikas there are 7 categories: dravya, guna, karma, generality, particularity, then inherence, and the last one is abhava. Kanada was the founder of Vaisesika system, who proposed first 6 categories, and the last one was proposed in the later period by the Vaisesika thinkers. As you know, they have also discussed about 9 kinds of substances, and out of 9 kinds they said that some are eternal and some are non-eternal. Moving further, when we have discussed Samanya, we have also covered some of the issues. To recap what we had discussed in a very brief way, according to Vaisesika philosophy, Samanya means generality. Whenever we speak, whenever we utter the word cow, dog, horse, table, so and so forth, it stands for the general term. Why it is so? Because we are not identifying a particular cow or a particular table over here. Rather, all the table that exists both past, present and in future. So, therefore, in toto, whatever objects, whatever table available in this earth, it refers whenever we talk about table. Whenever we talk about cow, it refers to all the cows that exist in this earth. Therefore, they said that the generality find in all the members of a class, and this is the essence. As a result, we can claim that that animal is different from other animal, although some of the features of that animal is different from another animal belong to the same class. An example, let I will give cow X and cow Y. Cow X has certain features, so its color is black and its height is more, then he is a healthy cow. Okay. And on the other hand, if I say that cow Y is a thin animal, short in height, it's less grass and so on and so forth, and its color is white. Now you can see that the two animals cow X and cow Y, although they are having different features, yet we claim them that these two animals belong to a particular class known as cow. Here, according to Vaisesika philosophy, they said that there is a cowness which is the essence that inheres in the individual cow X as well as in the individual cow Y. Because of this cowness, which is an eternal feature that we find in the cow X and the cow Y, as a result we can able to claim that although these two animals are of having different features, yet they have some commonality, and that commonality is nothing but the generality, that is called cowness. Therefore, they say that cowness is an eternal one, the generality is an eternal one, it has its own identity and it can be thinkable, and at the last they said that it can be nameable in the form of generality. As you know that whenever they talk about padartha, they said that padartha stands for an object which must satisfy 3 features. One is gyatva, then avidheyatva, then astitva. Astitva means it has its unique existence. Gyatva means we can think of it, we can know about it, and the last feature abhidheyata means it can be nameable. So, therefore, in the case of generality you find these are the three features. So, generality is something which is eternal, which has its own unique existence, which can be thinkable, that how this cowness inheres in all the members of cow, those live in this earth. How the cowness is an essential quality, is an essential element that inheres in all the members of cow having a particular class known as cow. So, therefore, they said that it can be thinkable and nameable, that you can see that we said that generality. Generality is a name stands for that element which is common to all the members of cow belonging to a particular class known as cow. So, therefore, in this context they said that as like dravya, guna and action are the independent padarthas, samanya or generality can be considered as another independent category according to Vaisesika philosophy. The same thing what I said I have written in my slide, if you go through, I said that it is the fourth category of the Vaisesika padarthas. Things of certain class bear a common name because they possess the common nature like cow, horse, etc. The same thing I said when I said that whenever we talk about cow, horse, it does not imply a particular cow or horse, rather it implies all the cows those exist in this earth, all the horses those exist in this earth. Therefore, it is because of the cowness, it is because of the horseness we could able to identify a particular class where we find so many members in that class. Moving further, we said that generally speaking that something common among objects of experiences is called generality. Something common among the objects of experience is called generality. We find there is some commonness in cow X, cow Y, cow Z and so on and so forth, and that commonness is nothing but the generality on the account of Vaisesika philosophy. Further they said, but any kind of commonality cannot be considered as samanya. For example, we can also find there are other sorts of commonality in different objects. For example, if you want to talk about say solid objects, then you talk about tree, then you talk about table, talk about laptop, talk about computer, talk about say your television and so on and so forth. You can even talk about a fruit which is a solid, although the solid is a common among all the objects that I had told you now, but that commonality is very rare. It is a different way of considering the generality. Therefore, they said that Vaisesika philosophy categorically mentioned that all the commonality that we find cannot be considered as generality. To consider something generality, we must find that it belongs to a particular class and it inheres all the members of that class. Then only we can find the generality. Another example I will give. For example, if I say liquid, then you have a water, you have a juice, you have kerosene, you have edible oil, so on and so forth. But here we cannot find the commonality, although the very rare commonality we find that all are liquid. But apart from that, these are two different classes, they belong to different classes. For example, juice cannot be in water, water cannot be a liquid like kerosene, kerosene cannot be a liquid like an edible oil. But certainly you can make the distinction, you say that water belongs to a particular class, juice belongs to a particular class, kerosene other liquid belongs to a particular class, and edible oil belongs to a particular class. Here you can find different kinds of water, muddy water, clean water, semi clean water, so on and so forth. In case of juice, you find apple juice, orange juice, so on and so forth. So, see, these are the members of that class. One class never overlaps with other. On the other hand, the edible oil belongs to a particular class. It cannot be same as the kerosene and petrol, diesel, so on and so forth. Therefore, although all this liquid that I have said having a common feature, liquidity, but all those cannot brought under a particular class. Therefore, commonality has a particular meaning over here according to Vaisesika philosophy. They say that if you say water, you can say that water X, water Y, water Z because of the proportion it has, the purity it has. Based on the purity, you can say that these are belongs to a particular class known as water. But certainly, you cannot say that water is same as kerosene and something which is in liquid form. Therefore, the categorically mentioned that although we find a little common among varieties of objects, yet commonality should not be understood in that spirit. Rather, it should be understood in the spirit where we find that a particular word refers to a particular class and all the members of that class must have a common features or essential features that inheres in each of them. If this is so, then we can say that here we find the commonality. They further also said that samanya is that which is eternal and resides in its individuals with inherent relation. In other words, commonality is eternal and having inseparable relation with its distinct individual. Lastly, Vaisesika philosophy, they mentioned that the generality or the commonality that we are talking about, which is known as samanya, it is eternal. It neither creates nor can be destroys. It exists all the time as it is without any change. But if you find those members belong to that class, they are subject to creation and destruction. They fall on the cycle of birth, growth and death. However, the samanya or generality or the commonness that we find among all the members of a class, that is eternal. There may be a situation where we find that all the cows, all the individual cows of a particular country may die because of some disease, but the cowness concept remains same. It is the cowness concept will exist as it is understood as it is without having any different opinion. Therefore, the last point they said that commonality is eternal and having inseparable relation with its distinct individuals. Now, let us discuss how Buddhist criticizes the concept of generality given by Vaisesika thinkers, and also further we will discuss how Nyaya Vaisesika defends Buddhist view and claim that samanya is an independent padartha like dravya, guna and so on and so forth. Now, let us proceed what Buddhists really think about the concept of samanya and how they criticize the Nyaya Vaisesika concept of samanya or generality. Buddhists in the first point they said that the notion of samanya claimed by Nyaya Vaisesika is a myth, because our experience is confined to individuals only, but not to universal. Whenever we talk about cow, immediately we refer to a particular cow that we have experienced, that we have perceived, but we cannot refer to all the individuals of cow, those live in this earth. Therefore, the concept generality is a myth. Whenever a child or any individual understand a particular object, certainly he or she understand that object by virtue of referring to a particular object of that sort kind. If it is so, then our experience never talks about the generality, rather our experiences in conformity to our perception talks about a particular individual of having so and so feature. Therefore, commonality cannot be accepted in the crude sense, because commonality cannot be perceived. What we perceive is that it is only the individual object. Further, they said that on the basis of Swalakshana, that is a unique individuality, we know Samanya. Buddhism said that each object has a different features. We identify a particular object by cognizing its different features. If it is so, then we find Swalakshana, the uniqueness in that particular object. Because of that uniqueness that exists in the particular object, we are able to identify that object of having so and so name. Therefore, they said that the commonality that Vaisesika are talking about, which is a myth, rather they should talk about that Swalakshana, that uniqueness that we find in a particular object or in a particular animal. That uniqueness helps us to identify that object. Henceforth, our perception relates to the uniqueness, talks about that object as it such, but nevertheless they said that it is because of the uniqueness we could able to identify the object of having so and so name. They reject the view that it is because of the commonality we could able to identify object. No, they further said that we are clearly rejecting the view as Vaisesika said, that because of the commonality we identify object of having so and so name. Because according to Buddhist, each and every object have a certain unique features, and because of the uniqueness we are able to identify that object of having so and so name. Further, they said Swalakshana is known through the perception or experiences, whereas Samanya Lakshana or the generality or the commonality as said by the Vaisesika is known through inference. Samanya is not an object of perception, but object of inference. Now, Buddhists claimed over here that Swalakshana really helps an individual to identify an object of having a particular name. Then further they said that because of our perception, because of our experiences, we identify object. But what Vaisesika talk about, the Samanya Lakshana depends on the individual or the cognizer's inferential knowledge. It cannot be perceived, it cannot be experienced. How can we perceive the commonality we find in all the members of cow belonging to the particular class known as cow? How can we do so? That is beyond our perception. It can only be inferred. And as you know that inferential knowledge require many more conditions for its validation. And if one condition is lacking in some or other form, then the inferential knowledge is not correct. Therefore, Buddhists said that whatever Vaisesika talk about Samanya Lakshana or the commonality that we find in all the members of a particular class, that is a myth, that is not a valid one. In this context, Vaisesika defends Buddhism. They said that Samanya is not an induction, it is an objective approach to a class. They said that it is not an induction. What is an induction? Induction helps us, induction expresses that by knowing x, y, z of a particular members in a class, we can talk about the whole class. If an individual knows a particular member, then another member of a particular class, then he or she can able to frame some ideas about that class. That is an induction. Here Nyaya Vaisesika is saying that we are not talking about the induction, we are not establishing that generality is a concept that we derive by the help of induction. No, rather they claim that it is an objective approach to the particular class. It is an objective approach of our understanding that because of the commonality we could able to identify that x, y, z, all these cow belong to a particular class known as cow. Here we already aware of the fact that cow x have a different features and cow y also having a different features. They may not have the equal features, yet because of the commonality we are able to claim that there is a generalness we find among all the members of cow belonging to a particular class known as cow. Therefore, according to Nyaya Vaisesika, that generality concept is not a myth, it is an objective understanding towards the objects of the world. It is an objective understanding which refers to a particular class, which refers to variety members belong to that class. Now, further Buddhism said that we cannot consider common essence is the sole criterion for samanya. Buddhism again counteract. They said that you, the Nyaya Vaisesika, you are talking about the common essence which belong, which exist in all the members of a particular class. That we cannot accept. We cannot accept because of the commonness we can able to identify the generality. Because of the common essence, it is the sole criterion to, because of the common essence we can able to identify the generality feature among all the members of a class. The reason they have stated here, they said that there are certain animals called cow not because they possess any common essence, but they are different from other animals which are not cows. Here Buddhists very empirically, very evidentially argued that whenever we talk about cow, we know that what cow means, what are the possible features that we must find in a cow. At the same time we know that how cows are different from dogs, cows are different from horses, bullocks and other animals. Therefore, they say that it is not because of the common essence we could able to identify the generality of a particular class. Rather, there are differences. Whenever we talk about a cow, we know that cows are not same as horses, bullocks, so on and so forth. So here you find the differences, here we find the distinction, the differentiation between cows and other animals, and this also helps us to identify whether a particular animal is cow or not. Therefore, they said that there are certain animals called cow not because they possess any common essence, but they are different from other animals which are not cows. Here they had given an example. They said that bullocks and cow, if you look from a distance, you find both are belonging to a particular class. Say either you say bullock or say cow. Now, when you comes closer, because of so and so features, you could able to distinguish that cows are not bullocks, or in other words, bullocks are not cows. Here you find majority of the features are same between cow and bullocks, and because of some of the unique features that you find in bullock as well as cow, we could able to identify that why we call that animal is a bullock, not as a cow. Therefore, they say that it is the distinction which helps us to find out a particular object of having a particular name. Further, they say, so there is no universal, but the name with a negative connotation helps us to identify a particular object of having a particular name. In this regard, Nyaya Vaisesika defends Buddhism. They said that there is the same universal in all the individuals of a class. There is no universal subsisting in another universal. They said that whenever you talk about bullock, whenever you talk about cow, you find that bullock belongs to a particular class, cow belongs to a particular class. As like I have stated to you that water belongs to a particular class and water cannot overlaps in the class of edible oil. Juice belongs to a particular class, it cannot be overlapped in the water class. Therefore, they say that each class has its own uniqueness, unique identity, unique individuality of its existence. Therefore, one class never overlaps with other. Therefore, samanya satisfies all the features astitya, jnatya and avidhyatya. Henceforth, it can be considered as one among the other padarthas on the view of Vaisesika philosophy. You might have already known that in the last class I said that there are different samanya, parasamanya, aparasamanya and paraparasamanya. So, I hope now it is very clear to you that how Nyaya Vaisesika really establishes the concept samanya or generality as an independent padartha among other padartha. Now, we will move to the another category known as Vishesha. What is Vishesha? Vishesha stands for particularity. Whenever we talk about Vishesha, it always refers to the particularity. Particularity means the ultimate atom in a particular object. The ultimate atom is known as particularity according to Vaisesika philosophy. So, a question may come to your mind, that is at a particular table or a particular chair, can we at all call to that object is a Vishesha? Here Nyaya Vaisesika said that no, a chair is a conglomeration of its parts, and Vishesha here does not have any further parts. It is the ultimate atom. It has its unique existence. It is not the conglomeration of all the parts. It is the last atom, you can say so. This is the spirit. They explain the concept. Vishesha, this is the spirit on which they said that one need to understand the Vishesha or particularity. Vishesha or particularity, it is opposite to the generality, because generality talks about here the common essence which we find among all the members of a particular class, but here Vishesha or particularity talks about the ultimate atom that we find in a particular object and which is not conjoined with any other objects. That is what they said. Vishesha is another category, another padartha satisfying three features, again astitya, jnatya and avidhyatya. Said that particularity is the extreme opposite of the universal. Vishesha means the unique individuality of substances which have no parts. If we talk about a particular chair, particular table, it has parts. Once the chair will be broken, it has different parts, but Vishesha as it such, it does not have any further parts. It is the unique in its nature. It has a unique existence. It has its own identity. You say that it is because of that ultimate atom we can construct many more objects. But if we ignore, if we ruled out the existence of ultimate atom, then we cannot think of any object, because it is the ultimate atom which is really responsible for the construction of a particular object, which is a gross in nature. The ultimate atom is subtle in its nature. You cannot perceive it as like we perceive the gross object, say a particular table, particular chair, and so on and so forth. Therefore, they said Vaisesika means the unique individuality of substances which have no parts. It is eternal in its nature. It pertains to the eternal substances like time, soul, etc. Now, if you remember what we had discussed in substances, we said that according to Vaisesika philosophy, there are 9 kinds of substance, and out of those few are eternal and few are non-eternal. Now, here while explaining the concept Vaisesika or particularity, Vaisesika philosophy said that the particularity pertains to the eternal substances like time, soul, so on and so forth. Now, how do we distinguish mind from soul? Because mind is an eternal and soul is an eternal, because they are not coming under the purview of creation and destruction. They are not coming under the cycle of creation and destruction. They are beyond that. They exist as it is, eternally, permanently, and timelessly. Therefore, they have a unique identity. It said that time is an eternal substance and soul is also eternal substance. If you see the Vaisesika Dravya, then the question arises, how time is different from soul? Is there any commonality we find among them or not so? If there is no commonality, why we say that these are eternal? Here Vaisesika philosophy clearly defines that although time, space, soul, so on and so forth are eternal substances, yet they have a unique identity. They have an ultimate atom. Because of that ultimate atom, time is different from soul. It cannot overlap with each other. Because of the space has a particular or ultimate atom, it differentiates from other eternal substances. And what is that which makes the time as an eternal substances different from other substances? Here the special element which helps the two eternal substances differ, this is nothing but the Vaisesika. It is because of the Vaisesika we are able to identify X is an eternal substance different from Y as another eternal substance. The same thing Vaisesika clearly stated in their argument. They said that it pertains to the eternal substances like time, soul, etc. Now, responding to the question that how do we distinguish mind from soul, they said that we have to admit that the existence of some unique characters in each of the eternal substances. As a result, they differ from each other. They said that time is an eternal substance, soul is an eternal substance. If they differ with each other because of the Vaisesika, because of the ultimate atom in both sides has their unique existence, and this is the way one need to understand Vaisesika or particularity. One should not confuse Vaisesika with a particular or ordinary objects that we can perceive in this earth like table, chair, tree, cow, etc. Although they are a particular or a individual object or individual animal, however, they are not particular in that sense. Particular, according to Vaisesika philosophy, is the ultimate atom which has its own unique existence. It never conjoined with any other objects. It is not the conglomeration of parts. Like an example I will give, the atomic sentence. Atomic sentence are those sentences which are ultimate, which are not conjoined with any other sentences. which are not to be considered as a combined sentence. It is the elementary sentence, it cannot be splitted further. In the same way, the particularity or the ultimate atom cannot be splitted, cannot be divided further. It does not comes under the cycle of creation, destruction, or birth or death. It never decay. It is eternal, as it is. It is permanent, that we find in all the time. Therefore, they said that like other categories, particularity or Vishesha is also satisfying three features known as Astitva, Jnata and Avidheyatva. Hence, they claim that uniqueness is nothing but the Vishesha, and therefore, Vishesha will be considered as one among the other Padartha. Now, further they claim the two ultimate particulars are not alike. The ultimate atom of soul and the ultimate atom of the space are not same. As like they said that one particular class never overlaps with another class, because each class has its own unique identity. In the same way, they said that no two atoms are same in their nature, because these two are different. There is a uniqueness found in every Anuj. Anu means atom here. There are plenty of Anus that we find. However, each Anu has its own identity, own existence, one uniqueness. Therefore, one Anu never overlaps with other Anu. Further, they said each atom has a separate individuality and uniqueness. Vishesha should not be understood as ordinary particular objects like chair, tree, pen, etc., which has parts. Prasastapada is a scholar in Vaisesika philosophy. He said that within quote and unquote, particulars are those which inhere in ultimate substances are called anteha, and as they distinguish their substrates, they are called Vishesha. I repeat further, Prasastapada said that particulars are those which inhere in ultimate substances are called anteha, and as they distinguish their substrates, they are called Vishesha. Now, you can see the clear distinction that how they made really particular is an ultimate atom, and claiming its unique existence, they establish that Vishesha or particular has a unique space, has a unique existence among other Padarthas. It cannot equalize with others, neither it can be derived from others. It has its own uniqueness, therefore, it exists uniquely. They said generality and particularity are absolute terms in this sense. Why absolute terms? Because in the one hand, generality has its own uniqueness, it has its own existence, it has its own standpoint. On the other hand, Vishesha or particularity has its own uniqueness and has its own standpoint. Although they are two extreme, we find Vishesha, in the one hand we find the ultimate atom which has no parts. On the other hand, when we talk about generality, we find that that is the commonness which find in all the members of a particular class. Therefore, these two extreme we can find while explaining, while we are trying to understand the objects of the earth, but nevertheless these two ultimate extreme are having their own existence, are having their own uniqueness. Henceforth, Samanya and Vishesha are considered as a Padartha among other Padarthas according to Vaisesika philosophy. Now, we will move to the inherence or Samavaya. It is the sixth category which mentioned by Kanada. What is that inherence? Now, before claiming its unique reading the slides, before going to the slides, we must understand in a very common platform what is inherence. Inherence relation are those relations which cannot be separated, which cannot be eliminated from the substance. The relation is so tight that one cannot be thinkable without the other. For example, if I say that oil seed and its oil, if I say that the fragrance of rose and the rose flower, we cannot take away the fragrance of rose from the rose flower. We cannot take away the oil from some other things. If at all we can take oil, we need oil seeds. So, therefore, oil seeds is the container and oil contained in it. In the same way, the inherence relation, oil and oil seeds are having the inherence relation with each other. One cannot be separated from other, or one cannot be derived from other sources. For example, we cannot get oil from any other seeds. We cannot get oil from say mango or say banana, so and so forth. To get the oil, we need oil seeds, because these are having the inherence relation. If we want to have a cloth as a product, then it has an inherence relation with the thread. Thread cannot be taken away from the cloth. So, here the inherence relation to be understood in this way. It should not be understood in the sense of conjunction. For example, if I put my hand on the table, my hand is conjoined with the table. This can be separated. My hand can be taken away from the table and can be placed in other place. Therefore, inherence relation is different from conjunction. Conjunction should be understood in this way. Conjunction means there is an association, this association can be separated. Conjunction means there is an addition and this addition can be subtracted. However, inherence relation is a relation which cannot be subtracted, which cannot be dissociated from its substance. For example, if I say the rationality of a human being, it is an inherence relation. If an individual has a judging power, has a capacity to take a decision on particular context, then he or she must have the rationality attitude. Of course, that rationality may vary from person to person, time to time and place to place, but the rationality as such, the element of rationality must lie in case of that individual. Otherwise, that individual cannot able to take any decision on any context. Henceforth, the spirit over here to understand inherence relation is different from conjunction. The same thing said by the Vaisesika thinkers, because they are the realists. Because of the realistic approach, we are celebrating Vaisesika views on many of this context. In regard to the inherence relation, they said that inherence or samabhaya is an independent category among other category. Why? Because it has its own unique existence. It can be nameable and it can be thinkable. They said that it is a relationship between two things like the container and the content. You cannot separate the container and the content, because they are having the tight knit relation with each other. They are having the inseparable relation with each other. An example, therefore, I have given oil and oil seed. We can derive oil only from oil seed. We cannot derive oil from other seeds. Therefore, these two things, oil seed and oil, are having the relation in the form of inherence. So, therefore, inherence relation cannot be separated. Inherence relation cannot be derived from one to other. Inherence relation cannot be dissociated from one to another. It has to exist in the container itself. Samabaya is different from samyoga. Samyoga talks about the conjunction. Conjunction means two things can be conjoined and two things can be separated from each other. Where we find that when we conjoin these two things, their existence has no issue, and we do not find any problem when we added two things together. In the same time, when we separate two things from one to another, we will also having no problem, and they have also equally have their own existence. But the same thing may not be applicable in case of inherence relation, because inherence relation is the kind of relation where one needs to be attached with the other all the time, eternally and permanently. Therefore, they say samyoga or conjunction is a temporary and separable relation between two things. However, the samabaya is an inherence relation, cannot fall in that trap, cannot be brought under that purview. Which purview? The purview of making the distinction between two things. And after distinction also, these two things exist uniquely, and we do not have any problem by making the distinction from one to another. That is the conjunction. But in case of samabaya or inherence relation, they say that one thing has to be associated with other things, and their association is a permanent association. We cannot dissociate one from the other. We cannot say that one exists without the other. This is the inherence relation. Samabaya is an eternal and inseparable relation between two things, rose and its fragrance. Now, if we smell something, you say that okay, this smell from rose, because we are acquainted with that smell, and therefore we say that the fragrance of rose cannot be dissociated from rose. However, we know other fragrance as well. Whenever we smell other fragrance, we say that this is not the fragrance from rose, or this is not the fragrance from so and so flower. Therefore, it is noted here that each fragrance is associated with a particular substance, and therefore one cannot dissociate from other, one cannot be separated from other. We cannot say that we find a glass of water in a rose, nothing of this sort. A particular thing must have a capacity to produce something because of that inherence relation. Therefore, they said that inherence relation is different from conjunction. It should not be understood in the form of conjunction. Therefore, inherence or samabaya has its unique existence, can be nameable and can be thinkable. Therefore, it is coming under the list of padarthas mentioned by Kannada. I hope now it is understood to you the 6 padarthas and their unique existence, which is explained by the Nyaya Vaisesika system. In the next class, we will discuss abhava or non-existence, which is added later in the category of Vaisesika philosophy. Thank you.